Talk boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. We now know who the undisputed lightweight champion of Ireland, Katie Taylor, is going to be taking on in her very next fight. You know, I half expected it to be either Estelle Mosley-Yoka or Sofia Ochagwava, Katie Taylor's old amateur rivals. But apparently she's going to be taking on unbeaten up-and-comer of Argentina, Karen Carabajal. Sports a professional record of 19 wins, no losses, no draws, with 2 knockouts. A professional...
She debuted as a professional back in 2013. Has a respectable record.
She took a hiatus from the sport 2019 through 2020, didn't return until 2021. A capable fighter, a capable boxer, and if you know anything about those Argentinians, you'll know they are not to be trifled with, not to be underestimated.
Karen Carabajal usually campaigns in the super featherweight division.
Just one division south of lightweight, down there at 130. She's going to be moving up in weight for this fight.
Nicknamed La Burbuja.
Translated from Espanol, means the bubble. She's about 4 years younger than Katie Taylor. Katie's 36, whereas Karen is 32.
You want to be mindful of that. Katie Taylor's world class, pound for pound #1, all that jazz.
The resume speaks for itself, but Katie Taylor's not getting any younger, so I do expect her to have to work for her meal. I expect her to have to work for the W in this fight. I've had a look at Karen Carabajal.
She's not half bad, if we're being honest.
Having fought 2 times last year and only once this year, back in April, Karen Carabajal has good physical dimensions for either a super featherweight and even a lightweight. Good physical dimensions, long arms.
The best way to describe Karen Carbajal's base style is a boxer puncher with an affinity for pressure.
Applying pressure. She's no mere pressure fighter that comes forward leading with her face, winging shots, swinging for the fences and hoping for the best. Karen Carabajal employs the jab.
Employs it often, sets up her punches with it.
Measures distance with it, keys her way in to bring over big looping rights.
Shooting that jab, staying side on. Good feet on Carabajal.
Characteristically takes a half step back should her quarry try to come forward on her, get something going.
Between that half step back and those long arms of hers, she effectively walks her opponents into shots.
Walks her opponents into punches, and this is more or less how she measures the distance and controls it, how she manages it well. She's actually quite long for a super featherweight and a lightweight.
She's actually pretty good, and she keys her way in with that jab.
Try to pin down the girl opposite the ring. Pin down the woman opposite the ring on those ropes. Pin her down in the corner to unleash punches, to unload shots. Karen does have an affinity for applying pressure, as she seems to be better moving forwards than moving backwards or laterally.
The trial here for Katie Taylor is contending with those long arms and that jab from Karen.
Because Karen doesn't need to be close to Katie to touch her with that jab as a result of that generous wingspan and those generous dimensions, it's going to be up to Katie to keep her head on a swivel, slip and hook.
Katie Taylor characteristically is very bouncy, very in and out.
A characteristically fleet of foot fighter that steps within striking distance, lets go of a couple of shots, and gets out of there safely. Katie doesn't just have fast hands, she has fast feet as well. But because she's coming off of a physically taxing fight where she was actually hurt in the fight, bloody, and took a lot of shots,
she don't need to be going for a tear-up with this girl.
Go tempting fate. Katie Taylor, big part of what's made her such an entertaining, crowd-pleasing fighter to watch is she likes to spend time in the pocket. She likes a good tear-up, good Donnybrook, but sometimes she spends a little bit too much time in the pocket, gets hit needlessly when she could easily navigate the ring, use it, and win a comfortable points decision. Being a more cerebral fighter,
she don't need to go getting greedy with this girl, getting greedy with her speed, getting greedy with her combinations.
You know, I understand that Karen only has 2 recorded knockouts, so she is no knockout merchant per se. Only 2 recorded knockouts in 19 professional bouts, 19 professional contests. It's safe to say that Karen's not a knockout merchant, though at the same time, you have to remember, Katie's 4 years older than Karen, and she was just in a physically taxing fight where she was hurt, where she was bloodied, and that was earlier this year. So she don't need to go getting greedy with her shots and her combinations.
Don't go from one war right into another one.
The saving grace for Katie is while Karen Carabajal shows a good jab, very good jab that she employs often, when she brings over that right hand, it's pretty wide. Plenty of room for Katie, a smaller, stumpier fighter, to get under that right hand.
Get under it, get out of there.
I do think Katie Taylor will have the edge in speed and the edge in mobility and agility, which have been very effective weapons for Katie Taylor in the past, being able to use that ring to your advantage, move around.
Don't spend too much time in the pocket. Don't stay in one spot too long because you can't let Karen get close to you.
You do. She's going to start ripping shots to the body, and that'll take your legs away. That'll slow you down. That'll make the fight harder overall. Katie's best bet to win this thing is to stay elusive, stay a moving target.
1 and 2 punches at a time and don't get greedy with shots.
In terms of an assignment and the difficulty level, I think Karen will prove a little bit more difficult than Jennifer Hahn and Miriam Gutierrez.
I feel like she can give Katie a little bit more resistance than they did, but she's no Amanda Serrano. She can be worked around. She has her limitations.
So given that this is the biggest stage that she will have ever fought on, she has to expect a fighter that is inspired.
Don't forget, this is an Argentinian fighter. Notoriously tough fighters.
She's already a pretty capable fighter as it is. She may look to rise to the occasion, given the occasion that this is the biggest stage she will have ever fought on, set to go down October 29th in London.
Yeah, I do get the sense Katie's gonna have to work for it.
You can't look past anybody. I trusted Katie Taylor to make a respectable choice, and even though it's not who I expected, it still is a respectable choice. Karen is a solid fighter. Look for this late next month. Men's middleweight news. Trainer Ronnie Shields says they're still hoping for a Golovkin versus Charlo unification.
This is what I'm always talking about.
If you let Canelo's critics tell it, Canelo's critics who just so happen to be Shields-Charlo's supporters, Gennady Golovkin is old and slow and ineffective and nobody wants to see him fight anymore. He's not box office, but he's box office for Charlo?
It's the same exact thing they did with Sergey Dedevianchenko.
It's the same thing. Charlo's fans didn't think it was a big win for Danny Jacobs when he gave Sergey his first professional loss. They didn't think Sergey was a big win for Gennady when they had their 12-round war, a thrilling fight, but when Shields-Charlo swoops in after them,
After the guy's been tenderized, after the guy's been inactive for close to 12 months.
after he's been dropped and beaten by Daniel Jacobs, dropped and beaten by Gennady Golovkin, oh, now beating Sergey matters. Now that Shields-Charlo swoops in.
This guy's a scavenger. He's a vulture.
Jermall was originally scheduled to return to the ring this past June in a homecoming bout against Maciej Suliecki. Yet, in the midst of preparing to defend his title for the 4th time in his career, the pugnacious Houstonian was forced to withdraw, citing a back injury. Several months later, Ronnie Shields, Charlo's trainer, has recently revealed that his young champion is fully healed and ready to rock and roll. He's back now, said Shields to Behind the Gloves. He hurt his back right before the fight, but now he's good.
Jamal and his wife were going through a bit of a spat, and she said something about him never boxing again.
And I said it then. You gotta take whatever Miss Charlo says with a grain of salt because she's angry. She's saying whatever she can say in the heat of the moment to try and hurt Jermall.
Don't assume that just because she said it, it's true. She said that this guy ain't never gonna come back.
According to Ronnie Shields, he is. According to Ronnie Shields, they being Team Canelo, weren't confident that was a good move for him. So instead, they chose Bivol and Triple G. And of course, they lost to Bivol and now he's fighting Triple G again. I don't knock anybody for doing business. I think you have to do what's good for yourself. As Shields alludes to, Alvarez is only a few short hours away from taking on Gennady Golovkin at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, Nevada for the 3rd installment of their rivalry. Golovkin will make the trek 8 pounds north to compete as a full-fledged super middleweight. Regardless of the final result, Golovkin has openly denied that he'll hang up his gloves for good, with both the WBA and IBF 160-pound titles sitting on his championship mantle.
Look, Golovkin's 40, and I think that his retirement hinges on whatever happens in tonight's fight.
How it ends. Most people are picking Gennady to lose this thing. Some are picking him to lose it on points. Some are picking him to get stopped. I'm picking him to get stopped. I think that Canelo Alvarez is going to go to the body often, and look to hurt him there because that seems to be a weak point for Gennady Golovkin. While nobody likes it to the body, Gennady Golovkin in particular.
Yeah, you could take the head punches. You could take the head punches all night, but it's the body punches that seem to get a reaction out of Gennady.
News of Gennady possibly returning to the 160-pound division has left an indelible smirk on Shields' face as he remains hopeful that a showdown between both Charlo and Golovkin could soon be on the docket. If Triple G comes up and beats Canelo, or if he loses, he still has 2 belts. Maybe that can be a fight for Jermall because he wants to unify. Hopefully, that can happen. More empty promises from Ronnie Shields, Team Charlo, and the PBC, because if what Charlo really wanted was to unify, he would have unified by now. I didn't forget that he was offered $6-7 million to unify titles with Demetrius Andrade, and he spat on that idea, shat on that offer, and subsequently went on to unify with no one.
Did you hear what Ronnie said? They weren't confident it was a good move for him.
Them being Team Canelo, who decided to take on a full-blown, full-fledged, unbeaten, light heavyweight in his prime. Ronnie would have me and you believe that somehow Shields-Charlo was a more dangerous choice, even though I have no idea what that's based on. If I compare Dimitri Bivol's light heavyweight resume to Shields-Charlo's middleweight resume, Dimitri Bivol isn't just the naturally bigger, unbeaten fighter. He's also the fighter who's been taking on better fighters comparatively than Shields-Charlo. This guy beat John Pascal, beat Joe Smith Jr.
Sullivan Barrera. Who is Shields-Charlo beat that we're supposed to believe he's head and shoulders above Dimitri Bivol?
It's the gaslighting that really gets me, that we're just supposed to assume that Shields-Charlo's better than Dimitri Bivol. Based on what? Jamal's been campaigning as a middleweight since 2017. That's 5 years.
And in the last 5 years, who's the best guy that he fought? Sergey on the bounce?
Right off a loss in a 12-round war where he got dropped, and roughly a year of inactivity.
It's the best guy that he fought in the last 5 years.
He hasn't fought at all this year, and because Ronnie and Jamal seem to be waiting around for Gennady to return to the middleweight division, I guess that means that Shields-Charlo won't be moving up in weight anytime soon for that David Benavidez fight. Guess not.
Oh, Heyman, he's got guys at 160, he's got guys at 168. Can't make a super fight.
But he's supposed to be some kind of fucking wizard. You've got guys at 160, you got a couple of guys at 168, and you can't put together a meaningful fucking fight, even when you have the ingredients. It just is what it is.
Well, what about the WBC's interim champion, Carlos Adames? When's the WBC gonna order Jamal to fight that guy?
I don't know. I guess it doesn't pay to be on that side of the street after all, as Carlos Adames is a PBC fighter. He's on the same side of the street as Jamal. He just can't seem to get a fight with him.
No, Jamal's waiting on Gennady.
It's more of the same from Team Charlo. We do have to wonder what Gennady's going to do after this fight, because Gennady Golovkin has ridiculed retirement talk, confirms third Canelo fight is the end of his DAZN deal. Beyond this fight, beyond this weekend, he will be a network and promotional free agent, free to field offers from anybody making them. The 40-year-old middleweight champion plans to continue his career after he encounters Canelo Alvarez for the third time on Saturday night. No matter the outcome of their 12-round, 168-pound title fight at the T-Mobile Arena, Golovkin reminded a small group of reporters Wednesday at the MGM Grand that retirement rumors have swirled around him since 2019, yet he remains an effective, marketable fighter. I retired 3 years ago before the pandemic, a smiling Golovkin said, and right now, I'm still here.
Gennady seems to have left the door open for his career to continue beyond this weekend's fight.
You know, a lot of guys, they've got a habit of saying one thing before a fight, feeling one way before a fight, and saying and feeling another way after a fight. Gennady Golovkin stands to make something like $20 million from this thing.
That's not counting endorsements, corporate sponsorships, and the potential upside of the pay-per-view. He's set.
I mean, think about it. Think about how many fighters out there go their entire careers. They don't sniff $20 million. This guy's making more than enough money to retire on off this fight alone. That's not counting what he made in the first Canelo fight, the second Canelo fight, what DAZN paid him when they brought him over initially, the Steve Rolls fight, the Sergey Devianchenko fight, the Kamil Zeremata fight more recently, his excursion in Japan with their box office star, Ryota Murata. Gennady Golovkin has made a lot of fucking money.
And he says he wants to make more.
Yeah, that's what he says. He says, you stay in boxing when you're still in demand and when there are offers for fights. Of course, Golovkin said, I have certain plans, without any doubt, regardless of the outcome of this fight, and whether it's going to be a draw, if the fourth fight is going to be offered, I would say, why not? If people want it, and you should not forget that I have 3 belts at 160 still.
See, this is the thing. Even if Gennady Golovkin pulls off a massive upset tonight, in all likelihood, the guy he fights right after that will be Canelo again.
Because he would stand to make the most money with Canelo, as opposed to returning to middleweight and pursuing a unification match with Shields-Charlo, or just hanging around down there, taking care of mandatory challengers, defending his title. The biggest bang for his buck fight in a scenario like that would be another Canelo Alvarez fight. Now, if he loses, the way I think he's going to lose, well, it's a different situation. If he actually gets stopped...
Oh, you know what? Maybe he don't get stopped, but he gets hit a lot. Proves to be a physically taxing fight. How long would it take for a 40-year-old Gennady Golovkin to return to action in a scenario like that?
You got Ronnie Shields, you got Shields-Charlo banking on Gennady Golovkin returning to the middleweight division as an option for them, though in truth, I can't really imagine Gennady crossing over to the PBC side of things. He's a global star, whereas they're a small-time, local outfit.
He's global, they're local. It's an international superstar in the sport.
Yeah, I get it. You got Charlo, Shields-Charlo, he's an option, he's got a belt, unification match, and for what it's worth at the box office, I actually think that fight could do decent numbers, depending on what the operational costs are. A fight like that could be successful, and it would be exactly what Shields-Charlo needs. It's almost too good to be true that he could catch Gennady Golovkin at 40 years old on the bounce and get him in the ring for a unification match. Yeah, for him, that would be great. But I don't see it.
You know, a Gennady Golovkin, a guy like that, he'd fit right in at ESPN.
Biggest sports network in the country, Hall of Fame promotional outfit, Hall of Fame promoter, Bob Arum. I understand that all they've got over there at middleweight at Top Rank is Yanni Bekalim Kanuli, who's been insistent he doesn't want to fight his countryman. He's not pursuing him because he looks up to him. He admires him, and he respects his elders. That's what he said by way of his social media, though.
I don't know. I feel like I could see a Gennady Golovkin on ESPN, but on Showtime with the PBC?
And I'm not protesting it, you understand. I'm not against it. I'm saying it's hard to imagine that that's what he ends up doing, and that's where he ends up going.
I mean, let me ask you guys out there, listening to this video, can you really see Gennady going to the PBC? Can you imagine it?
In your own mind's eye, how likely is that scenario to all of you out there? Assuming he doesn't retire.
Because I still think he might. Guy says one thing before a fight, another thing afterwards.
If he goes in there tonight, he gets stopped. Is he really going to want to hang around? For what?
I don't know. We'll see what happens.